Parks from Chillicothe, Ohio, founder of Parks Paranormal Research and Investigation. The reason I had Parks at the beginning is because I'm so egomaniacal that I had to incorporate my entire persona into that. It's a wonder my team puts up with me at all. I personally have been doing this type of research since 1986. It was the ripe age of 11, which to some may seem very young, but I've been fascinated by this type of phenomenon since that time. Every one of my team has been involved in reading or looking into their own abnormalities pertaining to the paranormal and throughout their lives, of course. We're out of Chillicothe, Ohio. This is actually going to work. I don't think. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. I'm an author who researches paranormal phenomenon. I write books on this topic and how occurrences of the supernatural affect people in the area afflicted by these anomalies. Of course, my first book was Paranormal Chronicles, published in 2008. I've yet to sell one here this weekend. I'm still holding out. Haunted Chillicothe was just published last July of last month, actually. So far, it's been very successful, not just in Chillicothe, but regionally, and people from as far as Minnesota are buying copies of this. And my team and I conduct all of the research and investigation for my books. We not only investigate locally, but regionally when able throughout the United States. My main focus is on ghostly / spiritual encounters and haunted locations. However, I do research UFO sightings, crop formations, cryptozoology, zoological creatures such as Bigfoot. And why is that not showing the rest of the word? Water monsters, giant birds, mothman, etc. I have been doing this kind of research for over 20 years. My first book, of course, I just introduced you to that. I want to go ahead and give you a brief sample, since you've not had a chance to peruse it yet, of course. What story would be good to start off with today? I think I will do Silent as the Grave, because by the end of this presentation, you will wish that I had been silent as the grave. It was a peaceful afternoon. The sun was beating on the back of my neck, which is characteristic of a pleasant day like this in North Carolina. The cool breeze blowing in from the ocean was as enjoyable as it was relieving. This tiny town known as Beaufort, nestled in the Outer Banks, holds many secrets and many legends. This is the final resting place of soldiers, pirates, and local townspeople. On this day, we decided as a family to walk through the old burying ground of Beaufort. I was excited and full of wonder. The rest of my party was a little skeptical as we entered the cemetery. Stretched out before us were headstones older than all of our ages combined, along with headstones from the Civil War and both World Wars. The time and the setting felt almost too perfect as we wandered through this province of the dead. You couldn't help but feel as if you were being enveloped by the shadows of night during the daytime. The cypress trees blocked out the sun like a tarp had been pulled over all of us. We happened upon an area of the cemetery where the graves of children were located. We were in search of an alleged heavily decorated plot that belongs to a little girl whose fragile life was snuffed out before her time. She passed away due to a grueling battle with yellow fever. Her grave was said to be draped in jewelry, cards, polished stones, toys, and stuffed animals. There were stories that we had heard from some of the locals pertaining to this little grave. There were tales of people hearing the cries of a child as they would walk past her domicile. There were also stories of people feeling as if they were being pushed and pulled on as they would walk past, or while stopping to focus on her grave. I'm going to stop there. If you want to hear the rest, you got to buy it. Paranormal Chronicles is a compilation piece which includes personal accounts mixed with stories and legends that have been passed down to me from those who have since passed on from this life. It has been very successful for me and has helped to further propel me into the map for authors within this genre. I recently finished my second book, titled Haunted Chillicothe, and I'm in the middle of marketing my third book, Haunted Holidays, to mainstream literary agents and publishers. I'm hoping that one puts me on the map right next to Nicholas Sparks, because Neal Parks, we say it really fast, sounds like Nicholas Sparks, so easily I can be confused with him. I'll go ahead and read a piece from Haunted Chillicothe just to give you a bit of an example of what this book is about. Since it is just based on local town, of course, of Chillicothe, a lot of you might not be familiar with the area or the places within. This title of this story is called Driving Miss Daly. That's not her real name. I put a fake name to protect the innocent. The preparations that take place the week before Thanksgiving can leave one feeling like they are spiraling out of control. Everyone seems to be getting into the hustle and bustle of the holiday season. This is a time for family gatherings, giant tables filled with fabulous food, and the wrapping of presents after the Black Friday sales. Christmas is right around the corner, and that means more family dinners, refreshing eggnog, gift giving, and a time for reflection. For those who are looking for a rebirth, drafting an outline for his or her New Year's resolutions will be the number one on their list of what to do for the new year. The holiday season can also be have a negative effect on most people who are victims of traumatic events that have taken place, and those who are alone in the world, or those who are without their loved ones. This story takes place on November 2008. I was working as a regional float manager for a Chillicothe, Ohio-based company, and had the pleasure of driving a client by the name of Miss Daly to her home. She was a delicate elderly woman who was healthy and wise. Through the wrinkles around her eyes and cheeks, it was obvious that she had seen so much change in our world throughout her life. Miss Daly had lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and so many other life-changing events. We conversed during the entire trip. Miss Daly shared personal stories about her life, love, and the death of her husband. We spent over 60 years of our lives together, she explained. I felt sad for her. However, her strength and composure led me to think that Miss Daly did not want any of my sympathy. He passed away the day before our wedding anniversary, she said to me, with a peaceful gleam about her. Wow, that had to be tough for you. I'm sorry to hear that, I said to her with a supportive grin. I continued, so do you have any grandchildren or other family members currently living with you? As we approached her, she said, no, it's just me. I'm all alone. Well, me and the television. I laughed out loud after she made that statement. I replied, you and the television? What's that friendship like? Fortunately for me, she found my comment amusing. Miss Daly inquired about my identity. Aren't you that boy from the newspaper that goes out looking for ghosts? Didn't you just release a book? She asked me. We continued on our journey. Slightly unnerved by knowing where this conversation was going to lead, I replied with a positive and proud, yes, I am. Yes, I am, and yes, I do. She told me that she was a believer of what I did, and that she and her husband had always been fascinated with the unknown. I was put at ease when she mentioned this to me. There are so many people who do not understand what it is I do exactly. They automatically assume that I either talk to dead people or I'm completely cracked out of my mind, I replied to Miss Daly. She laughed and concurred. I can see that where some people who don't understand those things might assume that. Our drive came to an end as we approached her house. I parallel parked my vehicle and came to a stop. I noticed an older man standing near her bay window at the front of the house. The man noticed as I examined him from where I was sitting. He smiled and slowly backed away from the window. I'm going to stop there, and if you want to hear the rest, you got to buy that book. Let's do that again. How it all began. Looks like it began with G, A, and page 12. Okay, my first paranormal experience technically was age 5. When I began my field research, I was at the age of 8. And at the age of 11, I wrote my first article pertaining to the unexplained occurrences that I had experienced. It was featured in Weekly Reader, if any of you are familiar with Weekly Reader. My first field investigation was age 12. That, of course, was me backpacking through the woods behind my grandmother's house in search of Bigfoot. Unfortunately, all I found were a couple of beehives and some ticks. I've not given up the search. At the age of 16, I started a self-published newsletter titled Paranormally Speaking. I published this from 1992 to 95. It later developed into a website that was known by the name The Realm of Conspiracy. In 1995, I formed a paranormal research team that went by the name Ohio Supernatural Alliance. We operated as a team through the middle of 1999. We also were basically the original Jackass team. It's a whole other story altogether. We did a lot of comedy videos too. On December of 2004, I befriended 3 individuals that had the same concept in mind. And after they realized that I had been doing this type of research since 1986, they were more than eager to get started with their own team. My new team at that time is known as SCOPS, South Central Ohio Paranormal Society. What is that? In October of 2007, my new team, SCOPS, had our field research featured in the book, Ghosts from Coast to Coast. We were chronicled in newspapers, on the radio, and even appeared on a few Columbus News television segments. In December of 2007, my wife left SCOPS, and I, of course, in order to spend more time with our new baby and pursue more of our own research on our own timetable in fields where we were more comfortable. This is how Park's paranormal research and investigation started. In late 2007, I began working on my first book. You already got that. In June of 2008, I was featured in a Know Your Neighbor piece in Chillicothe Gazette. My field research and my success as a paranormal investigator was heavily profiled. And in September of 2008, my first book, entitled Paranormal Chronicles, was released. I've traveled throughout this state, states bordering Ohio, speaking at conventions and festivals and selling my book at bookstores and paranormal conventions, except for this one for some reason. October 2009, the documentary Ghosts from Coast to Coast, the best researchers in the field, was released. We were featured in this documentary, and it's now available on DVD. That same month, I was interviewed by CHS-TV and mentioned in a documentary on the History Channel. December of 2009, we took part in a walkthrough investigation at the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina. Awesome, awesome estate. If anyone has ever been there or has plans to go there, I highly recommend it. The entire town was spooked. March of 2010, Yolanda Harris from Fox 28 News Columbus followed us and documented an investigation we conducted at Carnegie Library in Washington Courthouse, Ohio. May of 2010, I appeared as a guest and was interviewed on Fox 28's Good Day Columbus morning show. Our investigation at the Carnegie Library was heavily chronicled during the 10 p.m. news segment, which Steve did a lot of talking on that one as well. July 2010, my second book, On a Chillicothe, was released, and my team, my paranormal research team, consists of 11 members, including myself. Our personal experience and knowledge enables us to collaborate collectively and at times on separate occasions. This simplifies the countless hours of research required to bring life to the situation. Our cornerstone, we do not condone or partake in the use of Ouija boards, seances, provoking the quote-unquote dead. We believe that these tools, devices, and methods conflict with our Christian faith, as well as making us vulnerable to demonic manipulation and or attacks from negative entities. We only evaluate energies and the environment in and around the paranormal hotspots. And this is who we are. That's my ugly mug up here, of course. That's me at the Mothman Festival. It's just basically a list of my credentials. It's almost like a resume. Researcher, investigator, team leader, evidence authenticator, blah, 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 blah. And there's my wife. Really good picture of her. I kind of miss her. I haven't seen her all weekend. Neal's wife, paranormal researcher, investigator, photographer. That's Steve's little sister. There's Brent, paranormal investigator. He's been with me through a couple of teams. His wife, Charlie, one of our main photographers. Steve, paranormal investigator, and his wife, Stephanie. Another list of credentials. There's Kevin Coleman. He's our historian. He's usually dressed in period clothing. I think it's his pajamas he's wearing right there. Donnie Watson from Hillsboro. He's one of our new members we just added about a year or so ago. Nate, he's technically in training. He's been on a few with us, but our schedules are horribly conflicting, so it's hard to get all of us together. That's Kelly. And James. Not a whole lot to say about James, because he's only been on a couple with us right now. He's still in training. From 95 to 97, during the OSA years, I traveled throughout Kentucky, West Virginia, and investigated county-related UFO sightings. 97 to 2000, I launched investigations throughout the Ohio Valley, exploring various haunted locations. For example, Elizabeth's Grave, Crybaby's Tunnel, Emmett House, Blackie's Lake, East Jackson, the sand dunes out there, Cyber Trail, Stone Hill. That's where I've been. 2000 to present. Basically, everything I just said. Over the last 10 years, my team and I have investigated a 300-year-old cemetery in Blackbeard, the Pirates' former residence in Beaufort, North Carolina. Conducted walkthroughs at haunted libraries, for example, in Morehead City, North Carolina, and in Washington Courthouse. My team and I have researched and investigated ghostly happenings in Boston, Massachusetts, the central and southern portion of Ohio, northern portions of Kentucky, West Virginia, New York City. Crop formations, I mentioned we do that as well, Bigfoot sightings throughout Michigan, Vermont, West Virginia, Ohio. Weapons of choice, of course, traditional EMF meter. And my backup plan, what in the hell? And my backup plan, the electromagnetic field detector, which is plan B. That way if the EMF meter is going off, and I don't want to just tie it to something supernatural, it has something to do with the wiring and the environment. That is something that's actually used by AEP quite heavily, and it determines whether it's a man-made abnormality. Infrared digital thermometers. These are nice. I actually bought this from a traveling mechanic salesman, a Snap-on guy. I got that from him. That tells differences in temperature fluctuations and changes in the atmosphere. Digital voice recorders. Everybody has to have one of those. Of course, the Geiger meter comes in really handy if you are researching crop formations, and theoretically, ghostly occurrences are known to give off low doses of radiation. It's a good way to count that. Night vision equipment, great for if you're hunting Bigfoot or you're playing tag without flashlights. Dowsing rods, these are old school and they still work, and the water company uses them to this day. It's a conventional method. Just basically walking around to pinpoint water supply, and since water is conducive to paranormal activity, one would think that it would give off an electromagnetic charge, which would also cause these to react. Evidence that we've collected. This image was submitted to me from the Chillicothe Gazette. You'll notice up at the top of that covered bridge, the milky substance within the energy haze, the orb itself. Orbs are often disregarded by most researchers, of course, or just the conclusion is that it's a water droplet or a dust particle. The way to tell the difference, dust particles normally have the rings in the center or the snowflake effect, whereas an energy haze, whether it be spiritual or earthbound energy, has the milky substance in the center. This is a weird degree of energy. I'm not really sure to call this a rod or a flash orb, but it was taken at the old burying ground in Beaufort, North Carolina, in front of a tree, mind you, and leaves are not reflective, especially to that degree. That's a close-up of it. This is an enlargement of what you see beyond the picture here. Is a mausoleum. Beyond this tombstone, you zoom in, it looks almost like a pair of hands coming out of the mausoleum, reaching for something, like a lantern perhaps. Another strange, I call these like sprite orbs. They just kind of flow around. They look like little swimmers almost. The image was captured in 2008. Swimmers, really. Close-up of it. This was in during the Ghost Walk in Beaufort, on the Morehead City Ghost Walk in North Carolina. This is a library where a librarian ghost by the name of Aggie is known to pop up every now and then, and I'm wondering if that's her. And this is a strange energy haze that keeps popping up in some of these images of this ghost walk at the library. Strange light rods on top of people, around people, actually emitting from people. Same effect. And this was basically what put us on the map. This was featured in the Ghosts from Coast to Coast book. This is in an old restored slave cabin that now sits in Sabina, and it's used to reenact the Underground Railroad. And my wife had a 5th grade camp when she taught in Sabina, and they took the kids to do the reenactment of the Underground Railroad. She took some random shots of this old cabin, and that came out of one of the shots. The crop formation in Peebles, Ohio. This was October of 2003. I also have a story about that in Paranormal Chronicles. It's another shot of that. This is the one that popped up a month later in Bainbridge, Ohio. I don't see a group of redneck kids on 4-wheelers doing that.
It's actually quite beautiful though.
Mm-hmm.
Must have been a Mercedes UFO, is that what you said?
Nice.
And basically, I'm allowing you to draw your own conclusions on this. I stood in the center of the larger circle. I have fillings in my teeth because I ate way too much candy as a kid. So it was actually a magnetic effect. It gave me a dull, horrible ache in my jaw the entire time I was there. When my wife and I came home after exploring that formation, we were so incredibly fatigued, almost as if we had been exposed to a level of radiation or over-magnetized. That was a picture submitted to me from a football game that was at a local Chillicothe high school. This is a set of pictures submitted to me from another fellow investigator who lives in North Carolina. She found these at a cemetery she was taking random photographs of in Georgia. Notice above the girl's head the strange pink, the strange pink haze. It keeps popping up in different shots on top of the leaves. And now it's directly above that tombstone along the brush. And there's a close-up of it. It seems to be its own light source, emitting its own light source.
Yeah.
This is a picture submitted to me from a cryptozoologist who lives in Columbus while he was working in Michigan. This was one that was submitted to me from an individual whose son was at Crybaby's Tunnel in Chillicothe, Ohio on 07. And you can see the car down here. He got out, took the picture of the tunnel with all the graffiti, but a face and a misty haze appeared. An orb casting a shadow. I've never seen that. This was in the Dar Hunter's warehouse. It's on Water Street in Chillicothe. They used to stockpile bodies in that basement during the flu outbreak of 1918 that affected, what is that? It was a military installation in Chillicothe.
Camp Sherman.
Camp Sherman. I kept wanting to say Sherman Park. Camp Sherman. This was a little piece of real estate that had someone playing peekaboo from the window. Real estate agent submitted that to me. I would love to know what time of the day this picture was taken. This is during the investigation that I conducted at the guest house bed and breakfast in October of 07. This is outside in the courtyard where there's no power lines and there's no water supply beneath. And this was the guest house bed and breakfast. The house itself was built by Governor Tiffin, the first governor of Ohio, as a wedding gift to his daughter. And the guest house itself is completely touched by something, as well as the house in the front, which was built after the original guest house was built. A series of orbs appeared, which is why I started taking pictures, because my equipment was reacting to something in the courtyard. And there's said to be a Civil War soldier that will appear to people when they stay at the guest house in the courtyard area, making his rounds basically, marching. And this picture shows an orb next to the scarecrow and about 3 dominant orbs in the center. Well, I took more than one shot and they're moving. And this is a picture of the actual entryway to the guest house. The owner, his name is Tom, has, I guess it's a ghost parrot on his shoulder, but there's like an orb there. And there's a more dominant orb to the right of the light post. And this is in the basement of the Chillicothe Gazette newspaper. This is my old team. I was just taking a shot of the hallway as we were walking through. And we had a little traveler there. Now this is one that I'm questioning, of course, the actual orb itself, whether it's a dust particle, whether it's a water droplet moisture, or an actual energy haze. And there's more pictures of me at the Mothman Festival in 2008. I actually had a mystery machine knocked off. It was fun. Shows you how supportive my wife is. She sat at my booth and helped me out. So did my mother-in-law, which is nice.
I think they just bought one and have it.
They had a person dressed in a Mothman costume walking around.
Another one of those.
This is a collection of images taken during the investigation at the Majestic. This was taken by Brent's wife. And we kept getting this strange little light burst along the floor in the ballroom. And where this is in the window, in the next shot, oh, never mind. This is the floor of the ballroom. This was taken by Steve's wife. She noticed right here, you see up in the top corner through that doorway, Donnie was walking through, and she took the picture and was basically like, what is this? He backed up to look as she took another shot in the same area. this thing seems to be moving, whatever it is. Looks almost like a dimensional crack or a dimensional portal. I would not dare stick my hand in that. This is from the stage. A little, I want to call it an energy ball. Don't necessarily want to say it's a representative of the spirit, per se. Here we are using the dowsing rods in the basement. This chair was very mysterious. Stephanie sat in that and felt almost sick at that point. We were downstairs at one point, and you could actually hear someone scooting the chair across the ballroom, across the top of the floor, and there was no one up there at that point, because I went upstairs to see who was up there screwing around, because it was kind of affecting what we were doing down below, and there was no one up there. So I quickly called the two people that were with me to just survey the area, see if anyone had been up there or found another way out, but there was no one up there at that time, physically. And when we split off, there were like 3 or 4 of us per team, and they would go up one at a time, and each one of them experienced that chair doing something. This is Steve up on the balcony. This is an interesting picture because you can clearly see the exit sign reflecting in the window up here, but above it you have another, like almost hot pink burst of light, and then a smudge, almost like a white energy maze, and then a fourth rod right next to Pat's leg. And this is when the equipment was reacting to something at that point. The lights kept doing, from the stage, they kept doing this weird thing like that, almost like emitting high levels of energy, and you could actually photograph the energy. And you can see an energy haze surrounding the top part of the stage, and then an orb present up on top of the curtain. This is interesting. There's a story about the Majestic along this walkway where the floor used to extend all the way out. People will see an older man dressed in a long coat with a top hat walking down the stage, but still walking out in the middle of the air where the stage used to be, and then just disappearing. Stephanie took this picture, and when she noticed that in the viewfinder, she took another, and it wasn't there. It was clearly visible here. That's another shot she took in one of the dressing rooms. You can see her reflection in the mirror, but directly above her, you see almost like a dark image of a man's head and a white top shirt with the collar turned over. This is in the ballroom again. That strange orange rod on the floor seems to be sticking to everyone's pant leg. And as far as I know, wood that's not treated, nor does it have gloss on it, is not reflective. This is an image that was submitted to us from a woman who worked at one time with Steve's mother. This was an image that she claimed that she did not take. It just showed up on her camera when she was going through finding images to delete to clear up some memory card space, and she came across that.
I had something like that in a picture of my cat.
So we investigated her home, and Steve and my wife encountered what felt like something pulling on their clothes in the basement. And the equipment in the woman's deceased mother's room and the woman's deceased brother's room appeared to be giving a negative, positive feed-off.
I love that picture.
That picture looks like
like
Dave.
just like
Look,
Dave.
looks
It's
exactly
got
like Dave.
it's
The
got a
glasses,
beard.
has a beard.
Agree with this? It's also heavier.
I wish for myself, it looks exactly like Dave.
It does, really.
It actually does.
This, of course, common
That's
misconception.
creepy.
Business Dave.
It's common misconceptions, dust particles and moisture, of course. This is in an old abandoned theater in Marietta, Ohio. The traditional snowflake effect and rings and the circles that are representative of orbs. That's what most skeptics refer to as just non-spirit energy. Of course, those are just dust particles. Just giving you an example of the difference between the solid dominant orbs I was showing you earlier versus the misconception. Like that, another example, that's obviously a moisture droplet. Goes from coast to coast. The woman started it all. This is what put me on the map. Once again, selfless promotion. Paranormal Chronicles, my first book. Goes from coast to coast 2. It's available now. I'm on it. All the more reason to buy it. On the show with coffee. My second book. Selfless promotion once again. Calendar of events, the remains of 2010, presentations of book signings in Ohio and West Virginia, investigation in Niagara Falls, New York, 9th Annual Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, and October 2010. We're hoping that, I haven't updated that, of course, it won't be Fox 28, it'll probably be NBC4, chronicling the Majestic Theater investigation in Chillicothe, Ohio, investigation and documentary filming at select private homes in Chillicothe, interview with Ohio Magazine. I actually am working on that possibly for the March 2011 issue. And the 4th Annual Historical Ghost Walk Tour at Chillicothe, Ohio. And as we always do in November, December, and January, we take a break from all investigating for the holiday season. 2011, our plans for the new year, researching the Waverly Hill Sanitarium, hopefully. If I can get my wife to agree to that. Piecing together the mysteries of within the Ridges, Athens, Ohio. I'd love to do that. A follow-up is scheduled for May in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Hope you're ready for that, Brian. We plan to close the case in Elizabeth's grave in Ohio, research the history of the Serpent Mounds, Beaufort, North Carolina Ghost Walk. We always take part in that. Exploring the mysteries behind the Edina Mansion in Chillicothe. If we can get permission to get in there, there's a few people I know personally that will bypass what the Ohio Historical Society will allow. 2011 Ohio Paranormal Convention, hopefully. If I didn't bore you to tears, I'll get invited back to speak. 2011 Mothman Festival, Flatwoods Monster and UFO Convention, New Albany, West Virginia. If I can get my wife to allow me to go to more than just 2. And Chillicothe, Ohio History and Mystery Ghost Tour. More to come, of course. Any questions? Yeah, that's the only one that worked right.
What was that? You said 5 years old. What went on there?
Well, I'm okay to talk about it now. For a while, I was very quiet about it. But from the age of 5 until the age of 8, I kept seeing my grandfather. And he passed away when I was 3. So I struggled with it. I came to terms with it at the age of 8 because he would always pop up for like a period of a week. The week of his death, basically, and he would reach out to me and with his hands and like approach me, and of course scared me to death. As a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, you think either you're daydreaming, you're having a nightmare during the day, or you're completely cracked out of your skull. So, at the age of 8, I was more aware of attending church regularly and so forth, and I basically just prayed to Christ to take him away, bring peace to him. Take him somewhere. And from that point on, the vision stopped. He stopped appearing to me. But the odd thing was when he would appear to me, his neck and his wrists were slit and open wide and bleeding out. And it wasn't until I was 21 that I was told the truth about how he died. He had committed suicide because he was clinically depressed. So that's something that was very, very hard for me to talk about when I first started traveling around and writing about this. And of course, to this day, it's something I still don't even share with my own mother because it was her father that happened to.
Any ideas as to why you think he showed himself to you?
Because I was aware. He would show himself to my grandmother too. And she would always, she's the one that really got me interested in wanting to write these stories down because she told me a lot of things about the backwoods of Kentucky, Salyersville, Kentucky. Seeing ghosts in this cabin or seeing a ghost girl across the field. Just fascinating stories of Native American ghosts. And it just stuck with me. And I thought, she passed away in 2005 from a car accident. So I basically started writing this book as an homage to her. And it just escalated from there.
Neal, did you have any that crop circle, any equipment could you use there, have any samples?
At that time, I didn't have jack crap to use, just my own spidey sense. And when I walked into the... Oh, you don't use that? Is it broken?
We need a class on that.
When I walked into the formation, it struck me immediately. Because our bodies are 73% water anyway, so magnetism, frequencies, it constantly flows through us. So I just became aware of it, and my wife was aware of it too.
So where do you think those crop circles came from?
Very good question. I don't know if it would be worth our time to travel millions of light years to start cutting up crops or abducting cattle. We, on a human plane, can't think to that extent. I don't know if these are being created by beings from alternate realms, alternate universes, if it's a ploy from demonic entities. It's really difficult to tell because these things have been cited and stories have been passed since the 12th and 13th century. One of the first accounts from the Western world was from a priest in Ireland who went out early one morning just to look over the horizon and watch the sunset and noticed a formation similar to something geometrical in the 13th century in a field next to the castle. That was one of the first eyewitness accounts from the Western world. But of course, Native American culture talks about it throughout South America, of course. The cultures there have stories about formations of that nature, or supernature, I should say. Whether it's attributed to earthbound energy or something celestial, it's anyone's game. It's open to interpretation.
Do you think the cattle mutilations
More than likely, some kind of a hybrid creature, maybe an animal we've yet not identified at this point, that's in a more tropical climate than what we're familiar with, because it seems to only be happening throughout South America, some parts of like the swamps of Florida, Mexico, Texas, and they've captured recently some really weird-looking dog-like creatures, and have photographed them and put them on there, and they match the description of what these eyewitnesses are giving out. But of course, if you're freaked out in your mind and you see something at night, it may be completely blown out of proportion compared to how it looks in the day. In the daytime, dead at that. El Chupacabra, yes.
Nice ears.
It's funny, my wife tells me I never listen.
Selective hearing.
Yeah.
Did you ever investigate the Ohio grassman?
I have worked under the Ohio Grassman. I've not been to Salt Fork Lake. I've not been to that area to look at the, if you've seen any documentaries on it or read anything about
It's
it,
really good stuff.
they make these weird, like, Longaberger basket type igloos out of sticks and twigs and mud and everything. They set about this high, and it could house like 4 or 5 of us normal sized people, and they just basically, someone setting these up, and then they use rocks and twigs and or sticks as conventional tools, and they move on. And they're known to travel in packs of like 4 or 5, whereas Bigfoot is a loner and normally he travels alone, or Yeti for that example. Okay.